Okay, like I told you yesterday, we're going to start moving on. I do not want you to think that global winds are over with. I don't think that all of you know them like you should. So I'm going to keep throwing them on quizzes until you know them, because you got to know them and you got to know land and sea breezes as well. So let's do a little bit of trivia real quick. If you would please write down which global wind excuse me, which global wind is hot and wet, and it's one of the most famous global winds we have. It is the most famous global winds we have. So write that down. And then show me your answer. That would be the trades, my friend. The trade winds, okay? You should not have missed that. I'm gonna throw that on a test, I promise you. All right, write down for me, what is the breeze called that blows from the land towards the sea? Which wind, which breeze blows from the land toward the sea? Whenever you got it, you can hold it up. It's a land breeze, okay? Because remember, we always talk about wind and where it comes from. That's how we kind of name wind. Wind that comes from the west, we call it a westerly. Wind that comes from the north, we call it a northerly wind. Write down for me, which global wind is hot and dry and blows over a desert and blows from the west? Which one blows from the west? And whose wind is this? Whose wind is this? This is our wind. So you can't forget this global wind. They're going to ask you about it. I promise you it'll be on the EOG. The prevailing westerly is always on the EOG. All right, let me ask you a couple of questions about wind. We know that wind is a powerful force at times. It can knock down buildings, it can knock down trees, it can cause a lot of damage. Excuse me. We know that wind is an extremely powerful force. What do winds do for the atmosphere? What do they do around, other than blow things over, blow leaves around? What is their responsibility as far as weather? What are they responsible for moving? What are they responsible for moving? Yasmin. They move weather systems around the world, okay? Kind of like I showed you yesterday. I showed you those clouds moving. Well, that's what wind does, is it moves weather, thank goodness, because if weather got over us, it might not ever disappear if weather didn't move. All right, this is your last whiteboard question. When the sun comes up in the morning like it is right now, it starts to beat down on the earth and on the oceans. What is the main cause of wind? What does the sun do to the earth to make wind blow? All right, Yasmin, this is you. Excellent job, guys. It causes uneven heating, okay? Now, that's good. I see that, all you guys that get in on the Zoom every day pretty much got those correct, because you're doing the work, and I appreciate it. What I'm about to go over, we're gonna probably stay on for about 3 days, because it's a little bit confusing. What in the world is that? All right, I'm just gonna go over them. I'm gonna go over them really, really generally, and then tomorrow I'm gonna get into the basics of what each one of them does and the characteristics of each one. But I'm just going to kind of show you around and kind of describe for you what fronts do. Well, the other day on a video on Monday, Caleb, you need to mute yourself, bud.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay, man, no problem. The other day on Monday, I talked to you about the words air masses. And I discussed it a little bit, and I showed you that big, huge thing of cold air and the one of the hot air. That's what fronts are, is they are huge pockets of air that deliver certain temperatures, okay? I've done fronts for so long, and I don't mind doing them, I like doing them, but they're very complex, and a lot of the time when we do these fronts, a lot of people have a hard time understanding just the basics. So we're only gonna go over 4 of them, okay? You only need to know 4 of them. And one of them, it never happens around here, so I don't know why they threw it up there, but the other 3 do. So we're gonna go over 4 today, and I'm just gonna go over basics, okay? So we're gonna look at a weather map after this, but I wanna show you can y'all see that okay? Yeah, y'all can see that, can't you? Okay. So this is what they look like on a map, okay? And these are the 4 fronts that I've seen the most of. I think these are the most common ones. Obviously up at the top, you see that word warm front, right? Obviously we can see that. You see warm front. It looks like little red hills. And when you think of something hot, do you think of red or do you think of blue? I hope all of you think red. Yeah, you think of red, so that's why they denote them as red on a weather map, okay? Well, you look down to right below the warm front, and that's the cold front, okay? And fittingly, it's blue. When you get cold, your lips can turn blue. So that's why they made them blue, is so that everybody would know that that was a cold front on a map. And you can see they look like teeth. So they're not only different color, they're a different shape. And even if they weren't a different color, like let's say the map that I was about to show you was a black and white map where you couldn't tell a color. Well, that's why they changed the shapes of them, because some people didn't have color maps, all right? Now, this one right here, this is the one I'm talking about, this third one, this purple one with the bump and then the tooth and then the bump and then the tooth. That's called an occluded front. We don't really have too many occluded fronts around here, and I'm going to explain to you why when I get into the characteristics of an occluded front. It's more of something that happens really far up north, because you got to have a lot of cold air in order for an occluded front to happen. So we don't get a lot of cold air down here. I mean, we're mildly tropical, so we don't get a lot of occluded fronts. I've never seen one over us, but we'll look out for one. And then the last one you will definitely see, that is the underscore bubble, half bubble, and then the tooth on top. So they got the cold front up top and the warm front on the bottom, all right? And that means it's a stationary front. Now, what does the word stationary mean? Statues are stationary. When you have a big meal after Thanksgiving, you sit on the couch and you become stationary. When your mom parks your car, it's stationary. What does it mean, Alana?
That you're still?
Yeah, so stationary fronts, they don't move a lot. And the reason they don't is because both of them have the same amount of strength and they keep pushing back and forth on one another. It's kind of like you getting in an arm wrestle with somebody or an exact copy of yourself, and you guys can't really win because you're going against yourself. So stationary fronts are kind of dangerous in a way. They can produce a lot of flooding, especially if the weather's bad above them. We get stationary fronts here quite a lot, okay? So let me show you real quickly. Oops, I'm sorry, hold on one second. I went to the Weather Channel. Hold on one second. Okay, this right here is a weather map, okay? And this is the Weather Channel, weather.com, okay? And it's got a lot of cool stuff on there, man. This is where Mr. Murphy and I go a lot. We get our temperatures. We look for the weekly outlook. You can see hurricanes. You can see all kinds of cool maps. And this is just one classic map that I pulled up. And as you can see, it's got the entire United States up there. And I wish I could make it a little bigger, but it will not allow me to do so. But you can see a bunch of L's and H's. Do y'all see those? Do y'all see the L's and the H's? Okay, guess what those are?
Yes.
Those are low pressures and high pressures. And look, low pressures since they're usually warm and wet, they're red and the high pressures are blue. So they're trying to color code this so it's very beneficial for you to remember, okay? So if you look up here, you can see all kinds of blue lines, red lines. Look, there's that purple line, that occluded front that is way up north, up near New York, where Little Miss Fisher is from. We don't really get occluded fronts around here. New York gets them, Maine gets some places like that. But we're going to talk a lot about these maps in the future, because I like to talk about them. They're going to give you one on the EOG more than likely. They generally give you one, and you kind of got to look at it, and they're going to ask you where the cold front is, over what city, and stuff like that. So it's not too awfully hard, but let's keep going. So this is going to be really simple today. I'm just going to go over each characteristic of each one. So the first one we're going to talk about is a warm front. We get a lot of warm fronts in North Carolina. Most of the warm fronts, obviously, well, all the warm fronts come from what part? Do they come from the equator, or do you think they come from the pole? Where would warm air? The equator. They come up from the equator. That's where the warm air is. So warm fronts are generated, where the warm air is. And the warm air wants to come up and take over us. And it happens in the summer a lot. It happens in the fall. It can happen in the winter. We get warm fronts all through the year because we live in a kind of a tropical area. We don't live in totally tropical, but we're between tropical and frigid. So we're right there in the middle, and we can get this kind of weather. One of the most simplistic things that most people miss on the test is, what kind of air do you think a warm front would deliver? If a warm front goes over your area, what type of weather do you think you're going to get? Are you going to get cold, hot, frigid, Arctic? What are you going to get? What do you guys think? You're going to get warm. That's why they call it a warm front. It's not a guessing game where they're going to do the opposite. Hey, a cold front's coming through. It's going to get really warm. A warm front delivers warm air, okay? And that's its main job. And when it comes through, it produces weather. It produces a different type of weather than a cold front, though. So warm air, when it comes through, it goes above the cold air, which is going to be another story when we start talking about fronts each day. I got to do a lesson on each one because they're kind of weird that way. So warm fronts deliver warm air. Super simple. Well, if a warm front delivers warm air, then obviously, where's my cold front? Then a cold front is going to deliver cold air. Now, this weekend, actually Friday night, we got a chance for some showers and some rain. And the reason that is because a cold front is on its way down from the Arctic. And it's going to change our temperatures for Saturday and Sunday. And a little bit of next week, it's going to make us a lot cooler. It's going to deliver this cold air from the North Pole. So when it arrives, you're going to see a noticeable change in the weather. It's going to be cooler outside. It's going to be crisper outside. Now, cold fronts move a lot faster than warm fronts. Warm fronts are generally really slow and sluggish, kind of like after you eat a big meal. You don't feel like doing much. And cold fronts move really fast. You know, like if you go outside and you get the mail and it's 30 degrees and, you know, you're in your shorts and your socks, do you want to chill outside? No, you generally want to get inside as quick as possible because it's cold. So that's a good reason. That's a good way for you to remember that cold fronts move really quickly. It's going to be in and out of here in no time. We might even hear some thunder and hear some lightning because cold fronts generally produce a cumulonimbus cloud. But we'll talk more about that later. That's a little bit confusing for you. Now, this one right here, this occluded front is a crazy front. And the reason that I say that, I'm probably not going to spend a great deal of time on it because I've never seen it on a test. I've never seen it on a benchmark either. But this is when two cold fronts move in really quickly, because I just told you they move fast. Cold air is already in place, and then warm air moves in, and then cold air comes up behind it and traps that warm air up between the two cold fronts. Then you're going to have some problems. Because what did I tell you guys from the very, very first day? Hot air and cold air do not like one another. And when they start mixing, weather starts to happen. So now you got warm air up above two cold fronts, and that's generally when you start having some pretty bad weather. Okay, not always, but sometimes, okay? So occluded front's kind of a weird one. Occluded fronts generally are always going to deliver cold air. And then from there on, I don't know a whole lot about them because occluded fronts are kind of a strange one. Now, this last one, this stationary front, the one that Alana answered and saying that it doesn't move. Stationary fronts are a warm air mass and a cold air mass that have butted heads. And neither one of them strong enough to push each other out of the way. It's kind of like one day one of them eats their spinach and it kind of moves a little bit. And then the next day the other one eats their spinach and it moves the other one back. So they kind of get in this little match of who's stronger. And this generally produces an astronomical amount of rain if it's over your area. If it's over you and it's snowing, it's going to produce a blizzard. So they're not good to have over your area because they can cause problems. Falling water can cause a lot of problems, especially if it comes down a lot at a time. So stationary fronts can be a bit of a pickle. When you guys were probably 5 or 6, I remember we had stationary fronts all through the fall and the winter. They just kind of sat over us, and we had like the wettest fall and the wettest winter I could ever remember. It was almost like it rained every day. And that's because stationary fronts were parked right over us. It was like once we got rid of one, another one popped right back in its spot. So they're not a good thing to have over your area. And I'm gonna end this by saying this one thing. And if you don't remember anything else about what I've said today, I want you to remember this. When a front, whether it be a warm front, a cold front, a stationary front, an occluded front, whenever a front comes and goes through your area, it's gonna change the weather, okay? It's either gonna change the temperature or it's gonna change it to where it's gonna rain and get cloudy. There's gonna be some sort of change. High winds, fronts can bring high winds. So Friday, when you guys are at home, some of you, and some of you are at school, we might have some really gusty winds because the front's starting to make its way through. And then Saturday, you're gonna see a notable difference in the temperature because a cold front's gone through. So that's one of the main things I really want you to know. That's a question every year on a benchmark. What do fronts do to the weather? They change the weather. They change it all the time. And that's why our weather's constantly changing. Some days it's cold, some days it's hot, some days it's raining, some days it's not. It's all due to all these air masses that get pushed towards us, okay? So I know I've given you a lot of info today, and tomorrow I'm gonna start going over the fronts and what they do, because we gotta understand what type of clouds are made and what type of weather they bring, because all 4 of them are very different. And we're really just gonna focus on that stationary front, that cold front, and that warm front. We're gonna do occluded fronts, but we're really gonna delve into those 3 because those are the 3 you're probably gonna see a lot of. And those are the 3 I'm gonna focus on when I give you a test. So just be prepared, and just that one thing I just told you, fronts change the weather. So fronts are constantly changing, especially living in this latitude marker of between 30 and 60 degrees, our weather changes a great deal. I mean, think about it. We go through 4 seasons between 30 and 60 degrees latitude. If you live at 0 to 30 degrees latitude or 60 to 90 degrees latitude, you're not going to go through the changes we do. They don't go through the 4 seasons. They don't see their leaves change color, and they don't see their leaves regenerate back in the spring. So we live in a really, really special place, especially if you like a lot of different weather. So, I mean, you're lucky. You know, if you really like it to be hot, you might want to move to the equator one day. You know, right around there. You know, I know some of you Hispanic kids are from near there, and y'all know what heat is. Especially some of you guys from like Honduras and places like that. It gets hot down there. It's close to the equator. You know, if you want to be cold all the time, move up to the pole between 0 and 30 degrees latitude. I mean, between 60 and 90 degrees latitude, you'll get your cold air. I promise you. So I'm gonna type you up a little Google form. It's not gonna be very hard today. I'm gonna make it very, very simplistic because I want you guys to think simplistically about this and don't overthink. Warm fronts deliver warm air, cold fronts deliver cold air, stationary fronts, they don't really move and they change the weather. If you can remember that, then you're doing really good. You know, if you can remember what kind of clouds form and what type of weather they produce, then that's even better. But if you can remember those 3 things I just told you, that they change the weather and they're going to produce the type of weather that come over you. Warm fronts deliver warm, cold fronts deliver cold. And I know I keep saying it, but you guys would be absolutely astonished by how many people miss those questions on just my test. I'll ask it very simply. What type of air do warm fronts deliver? And everybody, 90% of them put down cold air. I don't know why. So don't overthink it, you know? Does anybody have any questions before I wrap this up? Nobody? Okay, cool. Well, either I'm doing a good job or you guys aren't paying attention. Probably a little bit of both. So if you guys need any help, I will be here for you. Just give me about 20 minutes to get a Google form typed up for you. And I hope you guys have a good day. So I'll see you tomorrow, those of you that are coming. I look forward to seeing some of you guys. So y'all have a good day.